beauty of that child is the tragedy of the Trump presidency. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer. But I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump's supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to
disgustingly looped in a 13-year-old boy with brain cancer into an attack on the president over January.
Beauty of that child is the tragedy of the Trump presidency. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer, but I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump's supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide. Cole Wallace disgustingly looped in a 13-year-old boy with brain cancer into an attack on the president over January 6. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt just torched MSNBC, and let's just say they didn't see it coming. In a bold no-holds-barred statement, Leavitt slammed the liberal network for spreading blatant lies about President Trump. Her takedown was fiery, unapologetic, and sent shock waves through the left-leaning media bubble. And don't worry, we've got all the receipts lined up and ready. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a moment of the action. The behavior of Democrats last night was completely disgraceful and demonstrated how severely out of touch they are with the American public. It was the most shameful moment in the history of presidential addresses in that beautiful chamber. In what was supposed to be a unifying moment for our country, Democrat members of Congress instead screamed at the President of the United States, who was just overwhelmingly reelected by their constituents, walked out of the chamber, and worst of all, they disrespected the American people. Right from the start, Karoline Leavitt came out swinging, slamming the Democrats for what she called blatant hypocrisy and utter disrespect toward Trump supporters. Now, I'm going to show you the moment she directly targets MSNBC. But first, I want to play this clip to set the stage. You need to see what triggered her passionate response. The Democrats had pulled off a dramatic walkout during President Trump's latest State of the Union speech at the U.S. Capitol. And let's just say Karoline wasn't letting it slide. She's about to call out their double standards and connect it all back to MSNBC. Watch this. Democrats didn't stand to keep men out of women's sports. They couldn't even clap for a girl who got her head smashed in by a man on a volleyball court. Democrats didn't stand for an innocent and beautiful child who is surviving brain cancer. They opposed eliminating taxes on tips and Social Security. They didn't stand in favor of cutting taxes for hardworking Americans. They couldn't even clap for 2 mothers whose daughters were killed by illegal aliens. One of the only things that could get Democrats off their feet last night was cheering for Ukraine. Not for America. If you're searching for the living, breathing example of hypocrisy, the Democrats fit the bill perfectly. This is the same group that talks about unity, claims to value every voice, and denounces segregation. Yet, their behavior tells an entirely different story. From cherry-picked outrage to obvious double standards, their mounting political contradictions are more than ironic. They're a full-blown exposure of the lies they build their image on. They posture for the spotlight, then abandon the very communities they pretend to defend. It's theater, and the American public is waking up to the show. And now here's where she takes aim at MSNBC. They've allowed their Trump derangement syndrome to stop them from celebrating America and our people. And we will not allow them to forget that. And it's not just the Democrat Party. The mainstream media still doesn't get it. Last night, MSNBC's Nicole Wallace disgustingly looped in a 13-year-old boy with brain cancer into an attack on the president over January 6. And CNN's first Chiron out of the speech called it divisive. It's becoming increasingly obvious that the Democrats and their mouthpieces at MSNBC thrive on one thing: hate. They pretend to be noble watchdogs keeping the government in check, but their true intentions are far from virtuous. If that's not true, then explain this. Why did Nicole Wallace, in a moment as distasteful as it was revealing, use a 13-year-old brain cancer patient to score political points against President Trump over January 6? That's not reporting. That's cruelty dressed up as commentary, and it exposes everything you need to know about their playbook. Beauty of that child is the tragedy of the Trump presidency. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer, but I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump's supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide. Yep, that's what a so-called seasoned MSNBC journalist said about a 13-year-old cancer survivor just because Trump brought him on stage. Let that sink in. Honestly, I hope the boy never heard those heartless remarks. At least not until he's old enough to understand and cope with them. This isn't just upsetting, it's alarming. It reveals how blind partisanship can erode even the most basic sense of decency. When devotion to a political party overshadows compassion for a child who survived brain cancer, something has gone terribly wrong. You lose your moral compass. You lose your empathy. You lose your soul. And unfortunately, that's where a large part of the mainstream media stands today, sacrificing humanity for viral outrage and partisan applause. And CNN's first Chiron out of the speech called it divisive. President Trump wasn't divisive. The Democrats were. And CNN was proven wrong by their own viewers, 69% of whom in a post-speech poll said they had a positive reaction to the president's speech. Now, this is something nothing says backfire or accidentally boosts Trump's presidency, quite like your own audience applauding him. According to CNN's own post-speech polling, most of their viewers actually appreciated President Trump's address and the hopeful message he shared with the country. Picture that. The same network that works nonstop to discredit him had to admit their viewers were moved by his words. If that's not poetic justice, I don't know what is. It's the kind of twist that shatters the script and reveals the gap between media elites and regular Americans. But Karoline Leavitt wasn't done yet. She kept the pressure on the legacy media with her continued takedown. It's sad and frankly pathetic that Democrats and liberals in the legacy media continue to allow their hatred for the president to override their love for our country. But nevertheless, the president will continue to unify this nation through policies that are grounded in common sense and that uplift all Americans. Unlike Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who routinely cater to establishment narratives and appease the woke crowd, President Trump stands firm in his beliefs. He unapologetically declares that there are only two genders, and that biological males don't belong in women's restrooms or sports, and he's not budging. While others fold under pressure or play political theater, Trump holds the line, fiercely defending common sense and reality. In a time when truth is often bent to serve agendas, his defiance of the noise is exactly why countless Americans continue to support him. But this is where things started to heat up. Piers Morgan, watching from across the Atlantic, took notice and called out the glaring hypocrisy. Here's his scathing take on the Democrats. If Donald Trump could have scripted a reaction from Democrats to his speech, it would have been exactly what unfurled before our eyes last night. I was watching it live here in New York, and every time I thought they couldn't plunge any lower, they plunged a little bit lower. And if you can't bring yourself to get up onto your feet and applaud a 13-year-old boy who's had, I think, over a dozen brain cancer surgeries, who's come through, who's survived, and who has a dream, and that dream was to be a Secret Service agent, and the President of the United States in front of the world gives him that moment and makes him an honorary member of the Secret Service. If that doesn't move you just as a human being putting aside politics to get up off your backside and applaud that brave little boy, unfortunately that's what hatred does. It clouds your vision. You see moments of genuine bravery that deserve applause, yet so focused on tearing down your rival, you can't bring yourself to honor the courage right before you. This is precisely why so many Americans chose not to support the Democrats. They've turned into a party of convenience ethics, quick to cheer anything that serves their agenda, but totally blind to valor or virtue if it originates from the other side. That's not leadership. It's hypocrisy, wearing a mask of righteousness, and voters are finally catching on to the game. This is why figures like Bill Maher are walking away from leftist ideology. You want to know why I have a bug-up mind about the left more than they used to? It's like this. There's an ugliness they never used to have. The liberals I grew up respecting, none of them are like this. Going after the wife, even the mafia doesn't do that. The venom coming from the left is genuinely sickening. They act as though they have a monopoly on the nation, expecting every American to blindly follow their lead. Anyone who steps out of line or dares to think independently is mocked, shunned, and treated like an outcast. They've locked themselves inside echo chambers of ideology, completely unwilling to consider differing perspectives. This kind of intellectual smugness is exactly why their message keeps falling flat. It doesn't connect with everyday people because it's divorced from reality. It's driven by control. Americans are fed up with being told what to think, how to feel, and who to despise. And that's exactly why the left is losing public trust, influence, and support. And the fact that Democrats couldn't do that,